Prime Minister with arrangements.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I inform the House that the Deputy Prime Minister will be absent from question time today to do with his duties as Defence Minister. The Minister for Defence Industry will answer questions on his behalf.
We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister advise the House how many of Australia's nearly 3 million small and family businesses will be carved out of Labor's capital gains tax grab?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I can inform the House that our government backs small business, and I make 3 points. We announced $3.5 billion in the budget in new measures that lower taxes for businesses to encourage investment and innovation. We're making the $20,000 instant asset write-off permanent for the first time. Providing $890 million in cash flow support over 5 years. We're introducing a permanent loss carryback to support resilience, investment and risk-taking, helping up to 85,000 companies a year. We're introducing loss refundability to help up to 25,000 start-ups per year grow in their early years. We're expanding tax incentives for venture capital to unlock industry knowledge for young expanding firms, and we're better targeting the R&D tax incentive. When it comes to capital gains, of course, there are 4 different carve-outs and concessions for small businesses, and all 4 are staying in place. Now, what that means is if you sell your active business to retire or to start a new business or to relocate, you can still reduce or, in some cases, completely remove your tax on any capital gains. Now, 90% of small businesses in Australia are eligible for these concessions, and they'll continue to remain eligible. All budget measures on top of that are entirely prospective, of course. They don't start until 1 July 2027. And that means, of course, that any business value that's been built up before this date can use the old discount rules, no matter when the business owner decides to sell in the future.
The call to the Honourable Member for Corangamite.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Why are the reforms at the core of the budget so important in the current economic conditions? How does it compare with other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Big thank you to the member for Corangamite for her question and for all of her work. Inflation came down in the data today in April, and that's very welcome news. It came down by more than what was expected, but it's still too high in our economy. We had inflationary challenges before the war, but the war has made them worse, and those impacts are broadening out in our economy. Now, petrol was a big part of the improvement in today's data, but not the only part. Rents and food came down a bit as well, and again, that's welcome. Now, our inflation came down in April in Australia, while it went up in April in the US and Canada and the euro area. But we know, Mr Speaker, that people are still under pressure. And that's why our budget strategy is so responsible and so important. It's why we've saved more than we spent in the budget and improved the bottom line each year and got debt down a bit more as well. It's why we're helping with the cost of living in a responsible way by cutting fuel taxes and cutting income taxes as well, Mr Speaker. Now, tomorrow we will introduce the tax cuts legislation with the changes to the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing. Now, they're in the same bill because one pays for the other, Mr Speaker. And it means that we are cutting income taxes 5 times and 3 different ways, and the average worker will save $2,800 a year when it's up and running, Mr Speaker. Now, if those opposite vote against a tax cut, they'll be making the exact same mistake that they made last year. It will prove beyond any doubt that they haven't learned a thing from the last election, and they haven't changed a bit since, Mr Speaker. Their 3 objectives are to talk down the economy, to talk up division in our society, and to run a scare campaign against the same changes that the Shadow Treasurer has repeatedly called for, Mr Speaker. Our three objectives are to make it easier to own a first home, to cut income taxes again and again, and to better align the tax treatment of income and assets. That's why Bob Brunig at the ANU says Australia's most ambitious budget in decades deserves support. It acts on numerous fronts, long treated as too hard: negative gearing, the capital gains discount, trusts and the tax burden on workers. It's why the Barefoot Investor said the system lets wealthy families with good accountants pay less tax than nurses and tradies, and that doesn't pass the pub test, he says. It's why the Shadow Treasurer himself has said there's no intergenerational justice in such preferential arrangements. He wrote that in his book. He said in the parliament the tax system is screwing over young Australians, Mr Speaker. The Institute of Public Affairs, Mr Speaker, said that indexation is a more rational and economically efficient way to tax capital gains, Mr Speaker. Too many Australians are locked out of housing. We're addressing that and cutting income taxes for workers, and those opposite should vote for it.
Floor to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Prime Minister, today's inflation data confirms that if the Coalition's tax-back guarantee were in place right now, a typical taxpayer would receive $410 of tax relief this year, growing to well over $1,000 per year in 4 years' time. Will the Prime Minister index income tax brackets to end their inflation tax bracket creep?
Order. The Minister for Infrastructure and the Treasurer will cease interjecting, and the member for Cook will cease interjecting. We're not going anywhere until the House comes to order. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I welcome the question from the Leader of the Opposition, who's actually asked me to comment on their tax policy. That is what the question goes to, Mr Speaker. And I welcome it, because tomorrow we'll be introducing tax reductions. Tax reductions. And they'll have a chance to vote for it or to vote against it. Now, we know that when we changed Stage 3, they said they were going to fight it, they were going to oppose it, that we should call an election on it, and then they voted for it. We know that when it came to the tax cuts that were in last year's budget, they said that they'd oppose it. They voted against it. To be fair to them, they did what they said they'd do. And then you know what they did? They took it to an election, and they got smashed. They got smashed, Mr Speaker, which is why they're down to 41 members over there.
The member for Goldstein.
Yeah, you really want an election now.
But they have lots of. They have other tax policies as well. They have other tax policies as well. They want higher taxes on the resources and manufacturing sectors because they want to abolish the production tax credits. They want higher taxes on motorists by abolishing the EV concession. Of course, we know they wanted higher student debts. We know that they want higher power bills because they want to abolish the cheaper home batteries program. We know they want more expensive training courses because they want to abolish free TAFE.
Order. The Prime Minister will pause. The member for Goldstein will cease interjecting. The manager on a point of order.
Relevant, Speaker. It was about income tax and whether you will index to prevent bracket creep. Will you do it or not? Very simple question.
Tim, your seat. Yeah, there's a bit in this question and about the Coalition's tax-back guarantee. If that policy, we'll get through this, Leader of the Opposition. You're not in a debate with me. So we just need to make sure that if the Prime Minister is referring to the Coalition policy he was asked about, that he makes it directly relevant to what he is responsible for the government. And he wasn't asked a broad-ranging question, as the manager indicates, which he was correct about, but he was asked about one Coalition policy, and I just asked him to be directly relevant.
Yes, Mr Speaker, I was asked about their tax policy, which is higher taxes, and I was asked about our policy. which is lower income taxes, Mr Speaker.
Order.
Lower income taxes under all those on this side.
Order.
Higher income taxes under those opposite. And on July 1...
Order. The Leader of the Opposition and the Treasurer and the Minister for Infrastructure. I can't hear a word the Prime Minister is saying from both sides. Prime Minister.
On July 1, Mr Speaker, every single Australian worker will get a tax cut. And they voted against it. And they not only voted against it, they said they'd reverse it if they had won the last election. But thank goodness, Mr Speaker. Thank goodness, Mr Speaker. As a result of all that, he's now leader. But if you want any indication that they're always looking in the rearview mirror, this is a mob who just made Tony Abbott the president of the Liberal Party. This is a mob who made Tony Abbott the president of the Liberal Party.
Order. The noise is too great at the moment, so we will just take that down a little bit, please. And I'll hear from the honourable member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How will the Albanese Labor government's reforms to employment services help get more Australians into jobs?
Call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Boothby for that question, but also her absolute huge contribution she's made to reforming employment services. Under this Labor government, we've seen the lowest average unemployment rate of any government in the last 50 years. We've seen the creation of more than 1.2 million jobs, and in the past 12 months we've seen more than 128,000 more Australians in work. But unfortunately, there are still too many Australians missing out on the benefits of work, because for decades our employment services system has treated everyone the same, regardless of their skills, experience or their barriers to work that they face. Around 1 in 5 Workforce Australia participants have been in employment services for 5 years or more, almost double than a decade ago. We must change the system to provide more targeted support and better calibrate employment services that help Australians into jobs. So today I announce that our government is embarking on the largest reforms of our employment service system in 30 years. Reforms that will help job seekers get the right support at the right time. Reforms that will deliver improved value for money by directing resources to where they needed to go the most. And of course, these reforms build on the very important work done by the member for Bruce as chair of the Select Committee, and I'd like to recognise all the members of that committee for their very substantial report. The system overhaul that we are reforming will be centred around 4 main changes. The first and most important change is we are ending the one-size-fits-all approach to servicing. We are creating 3 distinct high-quality service streams offering different intensity of support depending on an individual's distance from the labour market. The second change is the introduction of effective mutual obligations that are designed to actually help people get a suitable job and that are calibrated to a person's distance from the labour market. Third, we're overhauling the assessment and triaging process, so barriers to employment are identified early. And fourth, we are introducing a new planning process which supports people to develop employment goals and works towards them. Our government has committed in this budget $312 million as a down payment to establish the key new elements of this system, because every person in our employment services system, no matter how far they are from the labour market, deserves a clear pathway to employment.
Before I call the member for Mackellar, I'll just do a couple of acknowledgements. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today, Mr Chris Quealy and Mary DeVay visiting from the Blue Mountains as members of the guests of the member for Macquarie. And also in the Speaker's Gallery today is Ms Josephine O'Brien, who lost her husband, who was the nephew of the member for Kennedy, to leukaemia. And with Josephine and her family is Rochelle Akaban, who also lost her husband to leukaemia. They are here today in anticipation of World Blood Cancer Day tomorrow and are working to increase Australian stem cell donor registrations in support of this important cause. Welcome to Question Time. The call to the member for Mackellar.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Attorney-General. The recent resignations of both the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of the National Anti-Corruption Commission presents an opportunity to rebuild public confidence in the institution, but only if the new appointments are made independently and transparently. In line with best practice, will the positions be advertised for at least 2 weeks? Will selection criteria be made public? And will the appointments be made by an independent selection panel? And if not, can you please explain why? Thank you.
Give the call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for her question, which goes to the importance of the National Anti-Corruption Commission to Australia's integrity landscape as delivered by the Albanese government followed by our election in 2022. I am pleased to confirm to the House that the government established a merit-based selection process for all appointments to the NAC, which has been followed to date and which will be followed in future. The appointment process will be consistent with the Australian Government Appointments Framework and the NAC Act. Candidates for appointment are assessed by a selection panel following public advertisements. Only candidates assessed as suitable by the panel are presented to me as Attorney-General for appointment. Candidates are then referred for consideration to the Cross-Party Parliamentary Joint Committee on the National Anti-Corruption Commission, comprising members and senators from across the parliament, including the honourable member for Indi, who serves as its Deputy Chair. And I also thank the member for Indi for her work on this very important committee. The committee's decision is then reported to the Parliament. Mr Speaker, I note that all appointments made to the Commission to date have been unanimously approved by the Parliamentary Joint Committee. The merit-based process for NAC appointments reflects the Albanese government's commitment to integrity and accountability in government, and I thank the honourable member for her positive engagement in this regard.
The call to the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government's budget delivering reforms to housing policy that are pro-aspiration and pro-supply? Why is this important, and are there any alternatives?
Great question. Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Chisholm for her question and for her passionate work in the suburbs of Melbourne there, campaigning very strongly to give young people a fair crack at a better future. The truth is that the housing system is broken. That is the truth. Young Australians know it. Their parents and grandparents know it. They know that the housing system is not working in the interests of Australians. Young people simply can't get a fair crack if they're turning up at auctions and they're competing with people who have the taxpayer as a partner. Then if the taxpayer has to bid that extra $20,000 or $30,000 in order to be successful, then they can, because they know it will lead to a reduction in their tax, which is why it's been called for the reform by so many, including the Shadow Treasurer. It's why it was acknowledged by the member for Canning as well. And it's why in his valedictory in 2015, Joe Hockey said negative gearing should be skewed towards new housing so that there is an incentive to add to the housing stock rather than an incentive to speculate on existing property. And I've got a lot of time for Joe Hockey. And Joe Hockey yesterday was asked about this comment at the National Press Club, and he doubled down, Mr Speaker. He said this: if you don't like it, tough. I stick by what I said in my valedictory speech. Now, the difference between what my friend Joe Hockey did and what this government has done is that we're actually doing something about it. not giving a speech on the way out. We're doing something about it to make a difference.
Order.
And that's why the legislation that we will introduce tomorrow is pro-aspiration, to give young people a crack, and pro-supply, because people will still be able to invest in negative gearing and receive the existing capital gains tax discount. But in order to do that, they not only will be investing in their future wealth and their future assets, they'll be investing in the future wealth and assets of the nation as well. We are doing this because we want aspiration for all, not just for some. That is what we on this side of the chamber stand for, introducing legislation to improve housing supply, to improve aspiration and the opportunity for people to get into their first home, at the same time as we are decreasing taxes for them through the Working Australians tax offset and the $1,000 automatic tax deduction. And all of this chamber should take the opportunity to vote for it.
You have a habit of each time walking up to the debate box in a dramatic way. Just wait till you call, and then you will get the call and get to the question. Works both ways. When questions run out of time, I could easily withdraw questions out of order, but I'm not doing that, and I'd like to give the opposition a fair go with their questions. So each time someone yells out time, we can have this discussion again, and we can easily go down the path, because I have got a count of the amount of times that opposition members have gone over the time, and the questions will be ruled out. But I like to include as many questions as possible. So if you could assist the Speaker by not interjecting time, it would be greatly appreciated. The member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said, quote, "We are simply returning the CGT system to what was there before 1999. In 1999, capital gains could be averaged over 5 years to stop small business owners being pushed into the top tax bracket. Prime Minister, in your own words, it's time to be honest. Is this your policy?"
Order. Give a call to the Prime Minister.
From the Shadow Treasurer, who wrote a terrific book justifying why this should occur. But there are actually as well. There are actually as well a range of comments about capital gains tax. Here's what the Institute of Public Accountants had to say.
The member for Casey will cease objecting. Members on my left, enough's enough. The yelling's got to stop. It's ridiculous. Prime Minister.
Here's what they had to say, Mr Speaker. The Institute of Public Accountants, last time I looked, not an affiliate of the Australian Labor Party, although I am worried about the IPA being quoted by the Treasurer, I must say. It's the second faux pas he's committed today, Mr Speaker, on top of the tie. The Institute of Public Accountants had this to say. Over 90% of small business owners will potentially qualify for some of the CGT concessions. So if they can avail themselves of those concessions, they're going to achieve, in some cases, as low as zero. This is what Nash Advisory had to say. The preservation of the small business CGT concessions is the most important detail in this budget for business owners considering a sale. They went on. The concessions under Division 152 were always the more powerful mechanism, and they remain fully available. That is what they had to say. Daniel Petrie, the co-founder of Airtree Ventures, they help founders launch and grow their companies. This is what.
These are about small businesses.
He promised to oppose. I've concluded his answer. Give the call to the order. Order. Members on my left. When the House comes to order. When the House comes to order. The Minister for Infrastructure. Now the House has come to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Gorton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing. How is the Albanese Labor government helping Australians across the country to get into a home of their own? Are there any other approaches to housing policy?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and I thank the member for Gorton for her fantastic question. She's one of our brilliant incoming class of 2025, Speaker, one of many in our caucus who speaks so powerfully for the younger generations of our country who are being treated so unfairly by our broken housing system. Speaker, the member for Gorton and I share a really simple belief, and that is that everyone in our country should have a safe place to call home. But for far too many Australians, their housing dream keeps slipping further and further away. Whether it's the dream of buying their own home, renting somewhere near where they work, or getting into much-needed social and affordable housing, the system is not working for them. And as the Prime Minister said before, Speaker, our housing system in this country is broken, it is cooked, it is hurting people, and that is why our government is standing up and doing something about it. Speaker, that is why our government is levelling the playing field for first home buyers, building on the work that we have done to get 250,000 Australians the keys to their own home, and we're damn proud to have done it. Speaker, it's why we're committing another $2 billion of investment in last-mile infrastructure to unlock another 65,000 homes. That builds on $4.3 billion that we'd already committed to that endeavour. And, Speaker, of course, it's why our government is so proud to be delivering 55,000 social and affordable homes around the country, of which we've just ticked over 7,000 completed. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about alternatives, and I want to speak about the approach of those opposite, because, Speaker, for 9 long years, this group of charlatans sat on the government benches for most of that time without a housing minister.
Yeah, I'm just going.
Charlatans?
Yeah, well, just to assist the House. We don't need that sort of language.
Okay,
we'll just,
I'll withdraw, Speaker.
You know,
Speaker,
we want to show everyone respect.
Those opposite did nothing about the housing challenge that went from bad to worse to awful. Speaker, they did nothing about a generation of young people who were being locked out of the housing market, and now they come in here, Speaker, and they want to lecture us about aspiration.
Member Barker is now warned. Member Fowler. The Minister for Housing and Continuation.
Thank you so much, Speaker. And of course, I don't want to just speak about the record of the Liberals. We can't forget the Nationals in this discussion, Speaker. Now, I want to see if the parliament can remember when the Nationals were in power, how many social and affordable homes they built in the whole of rural and regional Australia. How many was it, Speaker? It was absolutely none. Not a single home built in regional and rural Australia by those people sitting opposite. Now, Speaker, we have got a long way to go on housing, but our government has the most ambitious housing plan that a Commonwealth has had in this country for 70 years. We started in 2022, we built on it in the budget, and we'll keep fighting because we believe that every person in this country should have a safe roof over their head.
The honourable member for Goldstein has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to your previous answer. In 1999, capital gains could be averaged over 5 years to stop small business owners being pushed into the top tax bracket. Prime Minister, is this your policy?
Order. The member for Spence will leave the chamber under 94A. It's highly disorderly. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. He referred to the previous answer, so I'll take up where I was rudely interrupted last time around, Mr Speaker. Daniel Petrie, the co-founder of Airtree Ventures, who runs a company that helps to founders to launch and grow their companies, and this is what He had to say,
the Leader of the Nationals and the
I
member for
call
Goldstone are
complete
warned.
BS that founders are saying they are going to move overseas because of tax. I think you need to take a tax and have a BEX and have a lie down. I think it is just appalling that you have this hyperbole going on without people firstly thinking through what might be fair in this country.
No,
Javon LaRue.
The Prime Minister will pause. I just warned the member for Goldstone, and you carry on with that sort of behaviour. You are going to leave the chamber under 94A. I think everyone heard me say very clearly that you and the member for Gippsland were warned. The member for Gippsland got the message, but you didn't. You had an extremely good go at this, but you're not going to continue to disrupt question time with that sort of behaviour. Prime Minister.
Yeah, Javon LaRue, who's the co-founder and CEO of KIU, said this. Here's what I don't see anyone posting about. The government gives founders 43% back on every R&D dollar spent today, not in 5 years, not when you exit, right now. You fill it in, you submit it, you get it back in 30 days.
Asked a question again.
Does the Prime Minister continue? Has the Prime Minister completed his answer? Okay. Order. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government strengthening Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect? And what additional support does the budget provide to lift bulk billing rates on the Central Coast and in the Hunter region?
Give a call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Robertson for hosting me in his beautiful electorate last week. He still pulls shifts at the emergency department at the Wyong Hospital, Mr Speaker, which is why he's known affectionately as Dr Gordon in that community. But importantly, he knows more than most the benefit of a well-functioning primary care system. And he also knows that when we came to government in 2022, bulk billing rates in this country were in free fall. Just in that 1 year alone, bulk billing rates plummeted by more than 10%. And it's no mystery why, Mr Speaker. It's because for years and years, those opposite froze the Medicare rebate, strangling the income of Australia's general practitioners and forcing them to put in place gap fees. And that is why in our first budget, Mr Speaker, we tripled the bulk billing incentive for Australia's pensioners and concession card holders. And I'm pleased to report, Mr Speaker, the latest data indicate the bulk billing rate for those Australians with that concession card is now around 93%, Mr Speaker. But unfortunately, the bulk billing rate continued to fall for those Australians who didn't have a concession card. And so last year, for the first time ever, this government extended bulk billing support to every single Australian, not just those who had the card. And as well, we offered a significant incentive to those general practices who decided to bulk bill all of their patients all of the time. And I'm pleased to report that only after a few months, Mr Speaker, that is already making a huge difference. Since the 1st of November, more than 1,400 general practices have shifted from charging gap fees to becoming 100% bulk billing, Mr Speaker. And the bulk billing rate to the end of March, so just in a few months, for those Australians without a concession card, has already climbed by around 9%, Mr Speaker, delivering millions of additional free visits to the doctor already. But, Mr Speaker, as the member for Robertson and his colleagues in that region know, those benefits are not being enjoyed by Australians everywhere. In Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, parts of the Hunter and the Central Coast, the number of 100% bulk billing practices is about half the New South Wales average. The bulk billing rate in some of those communities is around 20% below the New South Wales average and a whopping 30% below the rates you see in Western Sydney and south-western Sydney, with absolutely no rational explanation. And that is why this budget is funding 6 new fully bulk billing clinics in those regions to ensure that there is competition within general practice in that region, and to spread the benefits of bulk billing to that terrific community that the member for Robertson and his colleagues represent, because our plan to strengthen Medicare is a plan for all Australians.
Call to the Leader of the Nationals in the House of Representatives.
Well, thank you, Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Agriculture. This morning, the opposition leader and I met Paul, a Bungendore farmer who's worried about Labor's broken promises.
Order. The Minister for Infrastructure is warned. The member for Gibson will order. No, we're going to do this the proper way, and it applies to both sides of the chamber. Out of respect for the member for Gibson, he'll begin his question again.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture. This morning, the opposition leader and I met Paul, a Bungendore farmer, who's worried about Labor's broken promises and higher taxes. Will the minister confirm that more than half of Australian farmers are not eligible for the capital gains tax concession, exposing them to massively higher tax bills when transferring family farms to their children?
Call to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry.
I want to thank the member opposite for that question. I'd say to the member opposite they really should stop running scare campaigns and they should be presenting the farmers with the facts. Let me quote from the National Farmers Federation release the day after the budget, where the National Farmers Federation said, "In the context, there are several measures in this budget that are welcome and reflect the government listening to the concerns the NFF has consistently raised on behalf of farmers. The NFF welcomes changes ensuring primary production income will be exempt from the new 30% trust tax and confirmation there will be no changes to small business capital gains tax concessions." It goes on, Mr Speaker, and I quote, "Family farms are generational businesses built over decades and often represent a family's life savings and retirement plan. We're pleased the government has listened." And that's from the National Farmers Federation.
Order. Call to the honourable member for Lingiari.
Thank you. My question is to the Prime Minister, Mr Speaker. Today we mark the beginning of Reconciliation Week, an opportunity to reflect on our shared history. Why is it important that all Australians come together and play a part in our journey towards a more unified Australia and deliver better outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Lingiari for her question, but more importantly, I thank her for the grace that she shows in a long career representing Australians of all backgrounds, but particularly representing the largest Indigenous communities in remote Australia, and she brings a great deal of dignity to that role. We, of course, all Australians have a great privilege of sharing this island continent of ours with the oldest continuous culture on earth. And the beginning of Reconciliation Week is an important time to note that. We come together with First Nations Australians and recommit our efforts to shaping a future that is better for them and therefore better for our nation. Last Friday, I joined with thousands of Australians taking part in the long walk to the MCG, together with Michael Long. It was indeed an uplifting experience. And what struck me was the sense of hope and optimism and pride shared between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians walking together and then gathering almost 90,000 people at the G for the match between Richmond and Essendon, and the dancing, the singing, Dan Sultan, all of the performances, but it was a time of enormous respect granted as well. And today I welcome Travis Lovett to our nation's parliament, who walked from Melbourne to call upon Australians to walk together towards reconciliation. This week comes after the devastating death of Kumanjai Little Baby and the national outpouring of grief that has followed. An adored and loved little girl of just 5 years old, who should have had her whole life ahead of her. And last week I travelled to Alice Springs with the member for Lingiari and the Minister for Indigenous Affairs. I joined with the family of that beautiful young soul, her mum, her grandfather, her grandmother, We visited the town camp and the memorial which is there. And we spoke with all of the community leaders who had played a role, those who searched for little baby, the police, the emergency services, the council workers, the SES, the Land Council, the community organisations, Tunganjira and others as well, to say thank you on behalf of the nation for the way that they responded to an extraordinary tragedy. Their grief is profound and their hearts are shattered. As Prime Minister of Australia, I conveyed the sentiment of the nation, reiterating our commitment to their dignity and our respect for their grief. One of the things that struck me there was that in spite of feeling that sense of loss, their generosity of spirit, I do want to say as well, they appreciated the visit by the member for Berowra in the week beforehand as well. And I want to say to the member for Berowra that they really appreciated you standing with the community there as well. As Prime Minister of Australia, it is just a horrific thought that they've gone through that. But they were generous. They gave me a skin name, Jungala. They engaged in such a positive way. They're determined to go forward, to channel that grief into a positive future. This week, Reconciliation Week, is a chance for all of us to recommit to doing better, because as a nation we have to do better. All sides of politics have failed to do as well as we should have since Federation started and indeed before. So let us use this week. It is a public holiday on Monday here in Canberra for Reconciliation Day. That's an opportunity for us to recommit to do better in the future.
With indulgence, I call the honourable member for Berowra.
Mr Speaker, can I associate the opposition with the Prime Minister's sentiments about the importance of reconciliation to our country? All of us are committed to reconciliation with our First Nations people. From time to time we may disagree on the best path to get there, but all of us are committed to seeing better outcomes for Indigenous people. I was pleased, as the Prime Minister has acknowledged, to go to the vigil for Kumanjai Little Baby and to see the local member, the member for Lingiari there, and to go there with Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price from the other place, from our side, and to meet members of the family. We've all got to do better. We've all got to take more responsibility. We've all got to improve outcomes.
Thank the member for Berowra. We call to the member for Curtin.
Thank you. Prime Minister, my constituents are concerned that the government is increasingly using automated tools to make decisions without proper safeguards. Nearly 1,000 Australians have had their income support payments unlawfully cancelled by an automated tool. Automated aged care support decisions are opaque and eroding trust, and more automation is expected under the NDIS changes. We need to keep the human in our human services. Why has your government still not actioned the Robodebt Royal Commission recommendation to legislate safeguards and oversight for automated decision-making in government?
Call to the Minister for Social Services.
I want to thank the member for Curtin for her question, and issues around when and how the government uses automated decision-making are very important for us to grapple with as a parliament, because AI is increasingly prevalent right across our society and right across our economy. Of course, we as government have discussed in a great amount of detail the appropriate safeguards that we need when automated decision-making tools are used in any of our portfolios. And our approach is that in every case there needs to be human oversight of any of the use of AI. We don't just hand over decision-making to abstract computer programs as was the case under robo-debt, which caused such great suffering for 430,000 Australians. Of the Robo-Debt Royal Commission recommendations, 93% have been implemented of those 52 recommendations, and the remaining 4 measures, work is ongoing with those. 3 of those 4 measures will require legislation. Those opposite came up with an automated decision-making program that was designed simply to raise revenue. It was used to attack the most vulnerable people in our community. There is certainly no way that our government would ever do such a thing that we know resulted in the suicide of Australians who were impacted by this. I don't understand why those opposite are interjecting on such an important issue. The reason we had a Robo-Debt Royal Commission was because of your irresponsibility and cruelty in this area that had real human consequences. The member for Curtin can be reassured that whenever we use the opportunities that AI gives us to process information more quickly and more efficiently, that happens with strict guardrails and strict human oversight. Thank you.
Order. Before I call the member for Hunter, I'm pleased to advise the House that we're joined today in the gallery by the school captains from Unity Lutheran College, Murray Bridge, as guests of the member for Barker. Welcome to Question Time. The call to the honourable member for Hunter.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. How is the Albanese Labor government working with our farmers, fishers and producers to secure more fuel and fertiliser to help keep Australia's food production system strong?
The call to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and I do want to thank the member for Hunter for that question. He's one of many regional members, terrific regional members that are on this side of the House. And his region, of course, is home to some of Australia's best beef, dairy and wine, Mr Speaker, although I would like to say my own electorate also has some great Australian produce. But he, like all members on this side of the House, understands the critical role that our farmers, our fishers and our producers have in our communities. And of course, our party has been supporting farmers, and we are indeed the party for our regions, Mr Speaker. And we understand the importance of keeping our farmers farming and keeping our food production system strong. That's why earlier today I was really pleased to announce that our government has locked in over 80,000 tonnes of additional urea through our $7.5 billion fuel and fertiliser security facility. Through Export Finance Australia, we've partnered with Incitec Pivot to support the purchase of 2 shipments from Indonesia, with the National Farmers Federation today saying they're pleased to hear more fertiliser is on the way to Australian farmers and that every bit counts, Mr Speaker. As I have said, we do have enough fertiliser either in the country or on the water today for the current planting season, but we're adding to this to provide some certainty for farmers in the coming months. We have now secured, through the Finance Export Australia, 6 shipments of over 209,000 tonnes of urea through our fuel and fertiliser security facility. And of course, we also have secured, through the Minister for Energy, over 800 million litres of additional fuel, including critical diesel for our farmers, Mr Speaker. And this is part of our $14 billion Strengthening Australia's Fuel Resilience package. The CEO of Grain Growers, Shona Grawl, has welcomed this, and she has said, and I quote, "It addresses a number of the priorities outlined in our long-standing fuel security policy." And we've also made changes, Mr Speaker, to get our fertiliser to the farmers faster. We're getting it into the country by streamlining but not compromising on our biosecurity border processes, so it will get to the farmers faster. And I'm pleased to see that our work to get fuel and fertiliser to our farmers has also been recognised by those opposite. And I wanted to give a shout-out to the Shadow Minister over here, who said to Sky News, "The feedback from farmers from right across Australia is the supplies in the country are going to be okay for the immediate future." Mr Speaker, we do know that the war in the Middle East is impacting globally, and it's also impacting here at home with our farmers, and we'll continue to stand up for our farmers and we'll continue to shield them as much as we possibly can from the impact of this war, because our government will always back the farmers.
Give the call to the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said ISIS sympathisers who returned to Australia would face the full force of the law. How many ISIS sympathisers who arrived in Australia last night have been arrested or charged for entering a declared terrorist zone?
Call to the Leader of the House and Minister for Home Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Of the 2 cohorts that have arrived in recent weeks, there are 3 currently behind bars. Those three who are currently behind bars, 1 for charged with entering a declared area, 2 charged with crimes against humanity. No one should presume that at any point in time the work of the Australian Federal Police in terms of investigating and gathering evidence is over. And I would remind those opposite, before we came to office, 45 people who had gone there to fight had self-managed their return.
Call to the honourable member for Bennelong.
My question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. How has the Albanese Labor government used the laws passed by this parliament in January to prohibit dangerous hate groups?
Give the call to the Leader of the House and the Minister for Home Affairs.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I acknowledge the member for Bennelong and also acknowledge that the electorate of Bennelong is one of the electorates where hate groups have been distributing literature and some really horrific anti-Semitic and racial supremacist literature. In January following the anti-Semitic terrorist attack, this parliament passed new laws so that organisations that had been able to evade terror listing by keeping themselves just below those thresholds were still able to be listed as prohibited hate groups. On the 15th of May, and so shortly after that, we had a process which I'd previously reported to the parliament where we listed Hizb ut-Tahrir as a prohibited hate group. On the 15th of May, the government listed the neo-Nazis as a prohibited hate group. They've gone by a number of names: European Australian Movement, National Socialist Network, White Australia. The process on this for prohibiting a hate group has a high threshold, as it should. The process has to be initiated by ASIO. There's then a ministerial decision. There's then further work that has to be done by the Attorney-General, and consultation occurs with the Leader of the Opposition. That threshold had been reached with organisations which the Director-General of ASIO had previously described as, at that point in time, having been awful but lawful. Effectively, when we introduced the legislation to this parliament, at that point the neo-Nazis claimed that they were disbanding because of those laws being introduced. They didn't disband, they phoenixed. They went from one name to a new name and continued with their hateful ideology and their hateful methods of organisation. Effectively, what the listing means is this: while we can't stop people from having horrific levels of bigotry, we do make it a criminal offence for anyone to support them, fund them, train them, recruit, join or direct this group, with a series of penalties, the maximum of which reaches 15 years in prison. It sends a clear message to people who believe in racial supremacy that their views have no place in modern Australia. We are a country that judges you on who you are, not where you are from. The neo-Nazis have gone after almost every group you can imagine: the Jewish community, the Muslim community, people of Asian heritage, First Nations Australians. They've engaged in all kinds of bigotry, but what the parliament has now done is set a standard that says their views, their hate, has no place in modern Australia.
The call to the member for Kennedy.
Health Minister, the life-saving list
campaigners have taken Australia's bone marrow donor register from 168,000 to nearly 190,000. 3 years ago, they said Australia had not moved. You said Australia had not moved fast enough to help blood cancer patients find donors, and promised action to grow the registry. In this 3 years, Australia has lost 18,000 lives, 20 people a day. For many, including my nephew Liam, it is too late. Minister, have you really done everything you can to reverse Australia's continuing failure to meet our international obligations in this area?
The call to the Minister for Health, the Minister for Disability, National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Well, thanks, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Kennedy for the question and for his long interest in this as a member of Parliament, but also as a member of a family who have suffered grief and loss with the loss of Liam a couple of years ago. And Speaker, can I repeat your acknowledgement of the presence of Josephine and Rochelle and other campaigners for the Life-Saving List in this chamber, and they'll be joining you in your courtyard. Thank you, Speaker, for hosting the event tomorrow on World Blood Cancer Day, and I know the member for Kennedy and many other members on both sides of the chamber who've campaigned for a better blood stem cell donor list. You're right to say, the member for Kennedy is right to say that a few years ago I did acknowledge that Australia should be doing better here. We were then and are still one of the smaller stem cell donor registries of all developed countries. I said after the member's question a few years ago that I would take to health ministers a proposal to increase funding to the relevant organisations to undertake additional activity to recruit new stem cell donors to that registry, and we did do that. We did release additional funds, and there has been an immediate impact from those activities, with double-digit growth in donor recruitment in 2024. And this financial year, in 25-26, which is still not finished, the registry has expanded by almost 30%, Mr Speaker. But you're right to say there's more that we should be doing. The registry is still relatively small, and I look forward to hearing more ideas at tomorrow's events. You have asked me, Member for Kennedy, before and since whether we would consider expanding the age limit for new registrants to age 40. You know that clinical advice is that donations from younger donors is clinically superior, which is why the current limit is for 35 years of age, being the age limit for new donor registrants. But balanced against that, frankly, is our need to make the donor base as wide as possible. Ultimately, though, this has to be based on clinical advice. And as it happens, the department only earlier this week issued a tender for those services to go back out to market. We'll see who wins that tender, but I can undertake to go back to health ministers, first of all, to review the progress we've made and what else we can do, but particularly to direct the new provider to seek clinical advice about whether we should lift that age limit to 40 from 35 and undertake and progress any other ideas that come from this really important community-based campaign, Life-Saving List.
The call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories. How is the Albanese Labor government working with local government to help our regions thrive? How does this compare to other approaches?
The call to the Minister for Emergency Management, the Minister for Regional Development, the Minister for Local Government and the Minister for Territories.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Bendigo for her question. An incredible advocate for regional communities, and I've seen that firsthand during my visits to her electorate. Mr Speaker, the Albanese Labor government supports a strong and sustainable local government sector because we know the important role that local government plays in helping communities to thrive. And that's why this budget we have committed over $3.6 billion for local government through the Financial Assistance Grant. That's an increase of over 5% in the 26 budget, where the amount was $3.4 billion. And how does that compare to other approaches? Well, those opposite froze indexation on financial assistance grants when they were in government, ripping nearly $1 billion away from councils. Mr Speaker, this budget delivers for regional Australia, and it does so in partnership with local government. $1 billion a year across the country through Roads to Recovery, $200 million a year under our Safer Local Roads and Infrastructure program, $150 million a year under our Road Black Spot funding. And, Mr Speaker, our Growing Regions program is already delivering almost $600 million in funding for community infrastructure across communities across our country. From Tamworth to the Kimberley, Growing Regions money is flowing to applicants, sods are being turned and foundations are being laid for legacy building community infrastructure. Projects like the now completed Town Centre revitalisation in Mission Beach, Queensland, supported by $8 million in the Growing Regions Fund. And in this budget there was a further $750 million for future rounds of Growing Regions and Thriving Suburbs. And I can't wait to back in more of those worthy projects across the country. And that is a very different approach to those opposite. Because I read with interest the Sydney Morning Herald today that the North Sydney Regional Pool will open to the public in just a couple of months. Only 5 years after it closed, only blowing out to $122 million, a project proudly sponsored by Senator Bridget McKenzie in the other place when she was Minister for Regional Services. Funded under a grant meant to support regional women's sporting facilities, a grant with the stated objective of strengthening regional sustainability, capacity and diversity. I've seen the pictures of the upgraded North Sydney pool and it is absolutely beautiful. Right there under the Sydney Harbour. But is it regional? I mean, hardly. Will it strengthen regional sustainability, capacity and diversity? I highly doubt it. I mean, this was a project funded with no guidelines, no tender process and no application form. Those opposite used colour-coded spreadsheets to decide which regional communities got funding, and when it didn't suit them, they channelled money promised for regional communities to the North Sydney pool. We're building the Roma pool. You gave money to the North Sydney.
The Minister's time. Give the call to the member for order. Call to the member for Groom.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Since 2022, have any Australian government agencies provided operational support to repatriate any of the ISIS sympathisers?
Give the call to the Minister representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. I'll just repeat what the government's already said. We have not and will not provide assistance to anyone in that cohort.
Call to the honourable member for Petrie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Small Business. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting Australian businesses, Australian small businesses, including in the budget?
Call to the Minister for International Development, the Minister for Small Business and the Minister for Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Petrie for her question. Now, last month I had the pleasure of visiting Fatouche Restaurant with the member for Petrie and speaking with the owner, Rod. Didn't get to try their fattoush, but I promised I'd be back to give it a go, even though I do believe that my version of fattoush is one of the best. We'll see. Now, Mr Speaker, I've also been meeting with small businesses right across the country. I'm hearing about their challenges, about their opportunities and about their aspirations. And importantly, I've been hearing from them about their operating environments and how we can deliver the settings that they need to be able to flourish and grow. And that's why this government is focused on cash flow and operating expenses through targeted measures to reduce red tape and make it easier for small businesses to do business. It's why the budget includes $3.5 billion in supports for small business to support resilience, investment and growth. Things like making the $20,000 instant asset write-off permanent and the 2-year loss carryback permanent, introducing loss refundability for startups,
taking measures to reduce compliance costs and removing nuisance tariffs. Support which the Business Council of Australia has said, and I quote, "Making the instant asset write-off permanent and delivering loss carryback are useful steps for small and medium-sized businesses and will help businesses invest, grow and create jobs." On making the instant asset write-off permanent, the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand said this. They said, "It cuts red tape and lets businesses focus on running and growing their operations, supports growth and strengthens the economic foundations Australia needs in a challenging global environment." The Housing Industry Association, ACCI, COSBOA, National Farmers Federation, Master Electricians, the Financial Industry Association and Motor Trades Association of Australia have all welcomed these budget measures for small business, recognising that this government focuses on improving cash flow, supporting confidence, so that small businesses can get on with doing what they do best. And that's what small businesses tell me every day. They want us to make it easier for them to run their business and to grow when they need to. Mr Speaker, the Albanese government is backing small business and will continue to do that. We'll continue to do that because small business backs Australia.
Give a call to the member for Clark.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, I acknowledge your government's commitments and investments through the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. However, in my home state of Tasmania, 2 women have been killed in alleged domestic violence incidents just in the past fortnight. So will you join me in Hobart for a round table with family violence advocates, survivors and families who have lost loved ones to domestic violence to hear directly from them about what urgent action is still needed?
Give a call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Clark for his question and for his genuine concern and engagement with people in his electorate. There are, of course, 4 women occupy the other seats in Tasmania in this House, the members for Franklin, Lyons, Bass and Braddon, and they are all strong women who are strong advocates for the rights of women to live in peace and free from violence that has such a devastating impact. The figures that the member raises of 2 murders in the last fortnight are horrific. Every act of domestic and family violence is abhorrent and completely unacceptable. We have, as the member has acknowledged, invested over $4.4 billion to take action to end family, domestic and sexual violence. And that includes funding for the sort of organisations that the member has spoken about, 1,400 organisations that have directly helped around 450,000 people across Australia experiencing violence. We've funded 500 additional community workers. Last Friday, the Minister, the member for Sydney, launched the major consultation to shape the next phase of the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children over 2022 to 2032. That process will be driven by a wide range of people across the community, including academics and experts, frontline workers, employers, community members, victims, survivors and children and young people. The Minister for Social Services has encouraged everyone to have a say, and there is a consultation being held in Devonport on, I think it's June 18, coming up as well. I'm always happy to meet constituents where it's possible. Sometimes it's difficult to fit 50 hours into a day, but certainly I engage with the member when I've been in Tasmania, as he knows. The focus of the second action plan will be on what works to deliver practical and systemic solutions, those with the greatest impact. In areas where we are making a positive difference, we look for opportunities to redouble our efforts. We'll listen to all ideas. Quite frankly, this is a task for every level of government, but it's also a task for every part of society. Men need to take responsibility for the actions that take place. There's overwhelmingly violence against women and children from men. That is just a fact. And we need to do much better. I look forward to participating with the national plan. I look forward to continuing engagement with the member for Clark.
Give the call to the member for Whitlam.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. How is the Albanese Labor government investing in education in this budget? What would put this at risk?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend, the wonderful member for Whitlam. Mr Speaker, tomorrow is Public Education Day, and I'm a proud product of public education. But the truth is that our public schools have never been properly funded or even on a path to full funding until now, until this government and until this Prime Minister fixed the funding of our public schools. And in the budget you see it, the biggest new investment in public education by an Australian government ever. $20 billion extra dollars over the next decade. And all of that is now at risk, because we remember what the Liberal Party did the last time they were in power, how they ripped the guts out of funding for our public schools. And on the weekend, on Sunday Agenda with Andrew Clennell, Senator Andrew Bragg threatened to do it all over again. He repeatedly refused to rule out cuts to health and cuts to education. And I think that should send a shiver down the spine of every parent around the country. But it's not the only thing that they've threatened to cut. There are two other things on the chopping block. Mr Speaker, we're building childcare centres at the moment right across the country where they're needed. Order. In our public primary schools, including two in the member for Whitlam's electorate, one in Calderwood and one in West Dapto. And it makes sense, because if you're a mum or a dad with a child in primary school and a child in childcare, then it means one drop-off, not two. And guess what? The Liberal Party have said they'll get rid of all of that as well. We're also helping kids get the skills that they need to get ready to start school. Kids like Marina's little boy, Jason. Good name, good kid. Now, last year Marina couldn't get him into childcare, and that little boy wasn't talking, wasn't making his name was Jason, what a good kid. He wasn't talking, wasn't making eye contact, wasn't playing with other kids. Guess what now? He's in a childcare centre in Broadmeadows, and he's doing it all. He's talking, he's pointing, socialising with other kids. That is the power of early education. That is life-changing stuff. And that little boy is there because of a decision that we made here, because we changed the law, because we created the 3-day guarantee. That means that Marina is guaranteed access to 3 days a week of subsidised childcare, and that little boy, Jason, and every kid in this country has the chance and the opportunity that they deserve. And guess what? The Liberal Party want to get rid of all of that as well.
Prime Minister. Order.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I ask further questions to be placed on the notice paper.
Prime Minister has the call on.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to congratulate Prime Minister Whale on his recent election as Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands. Solomon Islands is an important nation in our region, and Matthew Whale was elected just a short time ago, and I spoke to him on the 15th of May and congratulated him on his election. I invited him to visit Australia, and I'm very pleased that he will be here next week for an official visit, his first visit as Prime Minister of the Solomons. He will be accompanied by senior cabinet ministers from the Solomon Islands government, and will meet members of the government and members of the opposition, and of course will be welcomed formally on the forecourt of Parliament House. Prime Minister Whale will discuss opportunities for further economic development and security cooperation with Australia. We had a very warm discussion. I've now had two discussions with him. It says a lot that the first international visit which he is choosing to make is here in Australia, and he will be a very welcome guest indeed. Despite the global challenges that we confront, we recognise that we will be stronger if we face these things together. The challenge of dealing with climate change, the challenge of dealing with security issues in our region, and he will be a most honoured guest.
Before members leave, I have a statement to make to the House. It's been brought to my attention that the member for Goldstein, after he was directed to leave the chamber for constant interjections after being warned, took to social media and has seriously reflected on the Speaker. I ask, when the member returns to the chamber, to apologise to the chair and remind all members not to reflect on the chair inside the chamber or on social media. Order. I present the Auditor General's Performance Audit Report No. 34 of 2025-26, entitled Cyber Security Readiness for the 2026 Census, Australian Bureau of Statistics.